My friends from the Atlantic Council of Montenegro, to you in particular, to all the visitors who've come from the Western Balkan region and beyond, excellencies and colleagues. I see friends of the security sector. I see members of the media. Good morning to you all, and thank you for taking part in this very important conference, To Be Secure. For my part, I'm personally honored to be able to participate for the 5th time in this important conference this year on the 13th convocation of the To Be Secure Forum. And I really want to applaud the Atlantic Council of Montenegro. This isn't easy. The organization has held this conference consistently every year, even when the world was in the grips of COVID, in order to ensure that we discuss security in an insecure world, because it's important, and we must not give up, and we must not let down our guard. Just like last year, we are standing at a critical junction, and the world continues to grapple with Russia's ongoing brutal aggression in Ukraine and the Kremlin's efforts to undermine the unity and the stability of an entire continent. And that's the backdrop that we have here today. The threat to European security and global security cannot be ignored. And as we kick off this year's To Be Secure Forum, let's make sure our conversations here are meaningful and vital and address the core issues that Melissa just mentioned. Because as we focus on issues closer to home in the Western Balkans over the next few days, we cannot and we must not forget that even as we speak, people in Ukraine are fighting a very real, a very hot, a very brutal, and a very existential war that none of us can afford for them to lose. While this forum addresses the security challenges affecting the entire Western Balkan regions, excuse me while I focus my brief remarks primarily on Montenegro. Now, I do this, of course, because it is my mandate, but also because I believe that the challenges Montenegro faces reflect the broader threats confronting governments across the region. From this perspective, I will mention 3 key topics of importance in Montenegro, but there are so many more. All of these are issues that cut across Europe and the Western Balkans, and I know they're going to be discussed and debated during the upcoming day and a half. First, I will share a few more comments on Russia's aggression on Ukraine and its implications for Europe and global security. Then I think I'll turn to the need for preparedness for mutual and global security. It's an essential duty for all European nations, whether they are NATO allies, EU members, or simply as a national responsibility in the face of numerous security threats that we all face. And finally, I'm going to turn to a bit of conversation on resilient democratic institutions. These are the foundations of security, and ultimately, these are the foundations of our prosperity. So first, let me turn to the task and the challenge presented by Russia, which more than 18 months ago started a war against Ukraine, and we're still witnessing, even yesterday, the brutal assault on sovereign Ukraine and the destruction. It stands as an act without provocation, without justification, without necessity, and continues. The invasion of Ukraine isn't just an assault on a sovereign nation, it's a blatant challenge to the values and unity of NATO and of the United Nations and of the principles that uphold global peace. The horror brings into focus the importance of the alliance and our shared resolve to protect the ideals of democracy. And I'm going to say up front, we must all recommit ourselves to stand firmly with Ukraine for as long as it takes to win the war. Just a few days ago, I had a chance to visit the beautiful city of Herceg Novi, which is just up the coast of Montenegro on the Adriatic. It's lovely. And I had a wonderful conversation there at a Ukrainian community center in the city. I met a number of women from Ukraine who have found safe harbor in Montenegro, having been displaced by the war's violence. They are now secure thanks to the generosity of the Montenegrin people who opened their doors and their hearts to these refugees. I spoke with these Ukrainians who had resilience and compassion in their eyes. These were not angry people, but there are also a few tears because they have no idea what their future will be. They are safe while members of their family are in peril back home. Their children are fed and even being educated, but they're rootless and they're anxious. So we find ourselves at a crossroad. What kind of world order do we want for future generations, for the boys and girls who are displaced by war's violence, as government leaders, as thinkers, as people who care? What future do we need to build for them? There are some political forces that see a future that includes partnership with Russia, who suggest that those fighting Russia are mistaken. They minimize the war. They spread the Kremlin's disinformation and propaganda. But what does this say about political leaders and political parties who bask in the liberties of Europe, engage in rich political discourse, and yet turn around and promote a narrative that aligns the futures of their citizens with Russia and its leadership? By painting a romanticized image of Russia as the protector of the Slavic people, some factions are spinning dangerous and false narratives, distractions from the real conversations we should be having and we will be having here in Budva for the next 2 days. Such misconceptions can lead nations astray, steering them away from principles that safeguard people's freedom and their future prosperity. We must not let a misguided nostalgia or stories of this region's past wars blind us to the threats of today and tomorrow. We must continue to stand firm, to speak out, and to act as instruments of change when we see Russia's malign actions and influence threaten the stability of Europe as a whole and the Western Balkans in particular. NATO. NATO as an institution founded nearly 75 years ago for the purpose of safeguarding the freedom and the security of the Euro-Atlantic members has been more unified than ever in the face of Russia's aggression on the continent. The response of the Allies has been firm. The response of the Allies has been strong. The response of the Allies has been unwavering. And the reason that the NATO allies were able to react and support Ukraine so quickly as its territory was entered by Russia's hostile forces is that each ally had undertaken the commitment to be prepared for the full range of threats that face our modern world. And they were prepared. And because we recognize the imperative to be prepared for these collective security obligations, I am pleased that my own country, the United States, has assisted our allies and our partners through the Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act. These are funds to augment our collective security and to boost the capability of partners who've supported Ukraine's fight for freedom, but who must still remain vigilant because there's so many other threats out there. And that is the real, And these threats are the ones we all know well, and which will be discussed in detail here at the To Be Secure Forum. These include, of course, cyber threats, unchecked nationalism, which was referenced by Melissa, rising authoritarianism, which we feel in the region, emerging technologies, which threaten us because we don't understand, so many others. So it takes me to my second theme, which is preparedness. I'll talk about it a lot because preparedness is the watchword. Preparedness is the key to our nation's security, your nation's security, and to our mutual and joint security. And while NATO stands out as the essential guardian of Euro-Atlantic security, and in particular the mutual security of its allied nations, it's worth noting that the European Union has once again emerged as a bulwark of stability in the face of the biggest threats to security since World War II. So let us not forget that the European was founded in the first place not to promote free trade and economic growth. No, those were seen by the founders of that union not as ends in themselves, but rather as tools to end the scourge of war that had swept across this continent twice in the first half of the 20th century. That was the real goal of the European Union. one which Russia's shameless aggression has once again thrown into sharp relief, reminding us of the importance of European unity and why the Euro-Atlantic community collectively has set out so many years ago to build a Europe that is whole, free, and at peace. So now, to Montenegro. Montenegro finds itself again at the threshold of the European Union, and it's clear that this is a nation on the brink of transformation, but turning that potential into reality hinges on the actions of a few key political decision makers. Because we know what the people of Montenegro want. They have voted overwhelmingly for a European future, a future that's been unduly delayed and a future they rightly and richly deserve. However, a prosperous future for Montenegro, indeed a prosperous future for every sovereign nation of the Western Balkans, can only be assured if leaders commit to creating the kind of stability and security that is built on strong democratic institutions. And that's why there's a pressing need right now for the quick formation of a government in Montenegro whose members share Euro-Atlantic values, a government that can act decisively to make reforms needed to join the European community of which it's a natural part, and a government that understands the technical aspects of EU accession and is ready to work hard and stay focused. So in short, what Montenegro needs is, in a pressing way, is a government that puts institutions above personal ambitions and party politics. Straying from that path represents more than a lost opportunity. It would stunt the dreams and aspirations of the people of this country, of this region, and it would be a retreat into outdated politics. And it would leave Montenegro and every country in the region that is seeking a similar future even more fragile and unable to respond to the very risks being discussed here to be secure. So that brought me to my third and my final theme, which is the importance of strong democratic institutions as the foundations for security and prosperity. Indeed, the key element of our response to Russia's aggression and to all the threats must be maintaining our resilience, the resilience of our democracies and the institutions on which they're built. In fact, I would say, and I'll posit here, that strong democratic institutions such as free elections, an independent judiciary and prosecution, merit-based public service, these institutions are more essential than bullets, F-16s, and Patriot missiles in securing our countries from the myriad of threats that face our modern world. In my home, the United States, democracy laid the foundation for a new nation more than 200 years ago. It was a sanctuary for free thought and belief. It fueled an industrial revolution. It spurred innovation. It fostered ideals that reshaped the world. I'm proud of that, but I know it wasn't a perfect journey, and it still is not. Our history bears marks of imperfections: discrimination against women, segregation of races, injustice. The path forward has been uneven. But ultimately, we, the United States, moved ahead because we did build and sustain strong democratic institutions. Because these institutions have stood firm, the rule of law has prevailed. Here in Montenegro, I think we're witnessing a similar process. The development of democratic institutions has sometimes been rocky, but the roots are strong, and there are many reasons to be optimistic, not the least of which is the dynamic energy of grassroots democracy that led to peaceful, free, and credible elections not once but twice so far this year. To the politicians and others who work with governments here today, remember, politicians are elected by people, and the trust of voters grants them control over very powerful levers of authority to work on their behalf. That's a sacred and profound trust. But the essence of democracy is not in the elected leader. It's in the institution they're charged with building and strengthening. Government officials, whether elected, appointed, or hired as a public servant, must remember we work for the people, and we're duty-bound and subject to the very laws we administer. Any deviations, any shortcuts only undermine our democracies. They weaken our institutions, and ultimately they threaten our security. So in conclusion, I challenge every speaker who will be here for the next 2 days, not just to discuss security, but to put forward solutions for stability, for resilience, and for peace. Let's highlight the steps Montenegro and all countries in the region can take in order to achieve stability at home and security in the region. Let's focus on concrete actions, on preparedness for mutual and joint security, and on strengthening democratic institutions, which is so fundamental. Because, my friends, to be secure means to be free and ultimately to be prosperous. And that is what the United States richly wishes for you, and which I commit we will stand by as you fight for freedom. Thank you.